Hello and welcome to Level Up with LEDVANCE. I'm Lynette Schaefer, the Director of Training, and today I'm going to be presenting you all the amazing selling features of LEDVANCE LINK in addition to installation methods. Now, LEDVANCE LINK is a network lighting control solution that starts with a simple free iOS or Android app and can be used on either a phone or a tablet. And from there, the list of features are pretty impressive. So you get individual luminaire addressability. You also have the ability to set occupancy or vacancy sensing. You use the app to do that. Depending upon the sensor that you purchase, you either have daylight harvesting or ambient threshold. You can also set time delay. On some select luminaires, you can change the CCT. You can also select your high end and low end trim. You also have the ability to do zoning and grouping. You also have local control, plug load control, continuous dimming. There's also preset custom profiles that you can also set with scenes. You also have scheduling, and you can share project QR codes. So if I'm a contractor and I get done commissioning the job, I can simply share a QR code with the owner, and now the owner can make changes if they choose to do so. Additionally, this is DLC approved as a network lighting control solution. Keep in mind that typically means you're going to have the opportunity to have greater incentives and greater rebates. And also keep in mind, not every manufacturer that has a network lighting control solution is DLC approved. The other really cool thing about this project or this particular system is that there are no gateways, hubs, routers, Wi-Fi, or internet required. As a matter of fact, the only time that you need to use an internet connection is when you download the app for the very first time. And really that just gives, you can use a Wi-Fi connection, right? So this truly is designed for anyone, contractors, facility managers, owners, and it's scalable to many applications from offices to schools to a number of commercial, hospitality, industrial, outdoor applications. It truly is a great solution when you want to achieve those essential lighting control strategies for offices, warehouses, patient rooms, and maybe even classrooms. Now, this system does communicate via Bluetooth mesh using Bluetooth Low Energy, BLE. So BLE means faster data transfer, a resilient radio, greater range compared to other wireless control systems. It reconfigures automatically when nodes or devices are added. And the network will also adjust when nodes become inoperable or blocked, which means that you're going to have a much more reliable system than other wireless lighting protocols. Now, when using Link, our system specifically, we recommend no more than 100 nodes per zone, and we recommend no more than 1,000 feet from the first node to the last node. The system itself does use radio frequency waves that operate at 2.4 gigahertz, and with any Bluetooth mesh system, you do have all of these nodes, as I was talking to you about just a second ago. They're all the devices. There's the fixture controller, there's the sensors, there's the wireless controllers. Those are all part of the system. So if we were to create two zones, you can see here one zone has 8 luminaires in it, the other zone has 2. If we were to incorporate a sensor into zone 1 and someone walks into the space, as soon as that sensor picks them up, the entire zone is going to turn on. In this case, we have zone 2. And as soon as somebody hits the button on that, it is also going to have those 2 luminaires turn on as well. Now, with any wireless system, you do need to understand that each node, each device has its own communication range. With the Link system, it can range from 40 feet up to 347 feet line of sight. If you do incorporate a range extender, that can go all the way up to 1,000 feet, again, line of sight. Keep in mind, any Bluetooth system, any BLE system, including ours, that signal can transfer through fiberglass, ceiling tile, fabric. And if it is going to do that, or you need it to do that, just keep in mind that that signal strength is going to be much less, and it's not going to travel nearly as far. So that 40 feet to 347 feet is going to be affected based on the fact that it needs to maybe transfer or go through those type of things. So keep that in mind as well. So let me talk a little bit more about zones and groups. So with the Link system, let's say you have a project and we call it ABC High School. The high school has 3 floors or 3 stories. Each floor can be a separate zone, and then each floor most likely has a bunch of classrooms, and each classroom can be grouped individually by themselves, or maybe you'll have multiple groups in one classroom. Maybe you want to have the back row of luminaires on one group and you want the front row of luminaires on another group. You can do all of those things. Now, keep in mind, any project can have unlimited zones, but you can only have 100 nodes per zone and no more than 32 groups in a zone. And remember, every single node, every part of that system is counting as a node. So what's required to get up and running? Well, the free iOS or Android app available for phone or your tablet. This is the only time, again, you need the internet connection. This is a big selling feature because imagine you're trying to do a commissioning and you're in the basement of a garage or inside of a garage or a parking garage or something, and you don't have very good service. This is amazing because you don't have to worry about having an internet connection, unlike other manufacturers. So in my opinion, this is a really huge selling feature, is the fact that you don't need internet or Wi-Fi, and it just makes it much easier to commission. You don't have to have that reliability of having that internet or Wi-Fi. Now, you also need a fixture controller, and the fixture controller can be a plug and play fixture controller. It can be embedded, or it can also be hardwired. So let's go ahead and talk about each one of these in the next slides. So for plug and play system, we have two options: the fixture controller only or the fixture controller with sensor. Obviously, you use the fixture controller with sensor when you want to have some sort of sensing ability. Now, these are intended to be used with control-ready products that feature a screw-in design. You simply remove the cover, and then you take your a fixture controller with sensor along with the adapter. Make sure you remove the little white piece that's protecting those three little pins, and you automatically screw it in. No electrician. You can make the change at any time. You can add it at any time. You don't have to do any rewiring. There's no 0 to 10 volt wiring going on. It is completely 100% plug and play. In this case, this strip requires an adapter, a bracket, basically, that allows you to position the fixture controller with sensor so that it picks up sensing. Otherwise, if it was just attached right directly to the side of the strip luminaire, it would be facing the wrong direction. So you do need a bracket in that case. But otherwise, all of these, no matter which way you look at it, are all controls ready, no electrician, no wiring, simple, easy design. Now, as of October 2024, these are all the products that are controls ready, but of course, we're continuously launching new control ready products. And just keep in mind, some of them do require either the bracket or the adapter or both. So just keep an eye out for that as well. Now, we also have a plug and play design with the Zaga, which some people may call Z10. It is basically a twist lock design. It is available in either white or bronze, and it is available on these three fixtures via MTO, made to order. Of course, this is as of October 2024. I'm sure we're going to continue to come out with more products that this will also work with. But for these three specifically, they work with the Z10 twist lock, and it is only available via MTO. Now, if you're using any one of these three luminaires, you can also choose to use a bracket. But the bracket does require an electrician due to the wiring that you see here. But once the bracket is installed, you can now easily add any of those plug and play fixture controller or fixture controller with sensor, and you are then able to start doing your network lighting controls utilizing the app. But the bracket does need to be wired in by an electrician. So how about if you're using the fixture controller that's embedded into the luminaire? What specifically sets these three luminaires that you see here apart from all the other link things that we're talking about is that these specific three have the fixture controller embedded in the driver, and that allows for the CCT to be adjusted via the app. So no more having to take the luminaire out of the ceiling and flipping a switch to change the CCT. These three luminaires, the volumetric or the volume 7A, the panel 5A, and the retrofit door kit 7A, all have the fixture controller embedded in the driver. And of course, this is as of October 2024. I'm sure we're going to be introducing a few more that are like this. But what's cool about being able to change the CCT is it does truly allow for the space to have customization based on the user, the tenant. And again, you can easily change it via an app or the wireless controller using the scene function. Now, I do want to add, there is another really cool feature. So if you want the CCT to change automatically throughout the day, the industry refers to this as adaptive lighting or circadian lighting. You can use the app to enable circadian rhythm so the CCT changes automatically throughout the day. However, with our system, a time clock is recommended because the time clock module has a built-in battery. So when there's a power outage, the battery kicks in immediately, ensuring that the network continues to follow the schedule until power is restored. So let me just talk about this a little bit further. So our system uses a real-time clock to automatically change the CCT throughout the day, not an astronomical time clock. An astronomical time clock uses geographic location and is based on astronomical data, and it calculates the sunrise and sunset based on that, and it changes the CCT based on whether it's December or whether it's July. It will be very much different. With our system, it is based on real-time clock. It is based on what event is going to happen at 8 a.m., noon, and say 6 p.m. So kind of keep that in mind. So in this particular example that you see here, this is how the Link system works. When you enable circadian rhythm using the app, when the time is less than time 1, the lowest CCT temperature is adopted. Between time 1 and 2, the lowest CCT smoothly switches up to the highest CCT. And then from time 2 to time 3, it slowly starts to decrease. And when that lowest CCT level is set, it then keeps that until the next day. The default time in our system is 8, noon, and 6 p.m., but you can change that if you want to. But just remember, it is set on a specific time. And again, the CCT can also, if you want, be changed by a scene. So let's say I'm a teacher and I want to be able to automatically adjust those CCTs on the fly. You can do that using the wireless controller, or you can use the app as well, or you can do this really cool kind of setup where it automatically changes throughout the day, and that is by enabling circadian rhythm. So since the fixture controller is embedded in the luminaire, you may also be asking yourself, well, how do I add a sensor to these specific 3 luminaires? Well, the simplest way is to add a sensor using the push-in sensor that you see here. No wiring, no electrician, remove the cover, expose the wiring harness, make the connection, then push it into the luminaire. It is that simple. We refer to this as the push-in design. So now that we talked about plug and play and we've talked about the embedded, what happens if you're using controls ready, or what happens if you're not using those controls ready products or those embedded products and you want to use Link? Well, you can incorporate Link using any 0 to 10 volt dimming luminaire. Doesn't matter if it's ours or someone else's. A couple of things I just want to mention on this slide is that we do only offer one dual tech sensor within our Link system. This is a hardwired option. All other sensors that are available with the Link sensor or the Link system are all going to be PIR. With this specific dual tech sensor, there are some limitations which we will be addressing in more of a technical product training when we get there. But the thing I just want to mention is that the limitation is simply the fact that, yes, it is dual technology, not necessarily a limitation there, but it does not do 0 to 10 volt dimming. Okay, this is the only one that does not do 0 to 10 volt dimming. On the other 2 that you see here next to it, the ceiling sensor and power supply, these 2 typically always go together unless you can get 12 volt aux from a nearby luminaire and power the sensor with that. Otherwise, the sensor needs to get power and it needs to have the power supplied to go with it. And then the last 2 that you see here is just basically the 2 options for zone controls. You've got a 3 amp or you have a 20 amp. It just depends on how many amps you are going to be operating and which one you need. So in the next couple of slides, I'm going to walk you through some of these hardwired options. So here's an example of an office with 12 luminaires, 2 groups with 1 being by a set of windows. This setup works for any 0 to 10 volt dimming luminaire. It's ideal for mounting heights under 15 feet. You can see here the sensor gets the power from that power supply that I mentioned through this 12 volt aux, and then it uses 0 to 10 volt dimming. Also, you'll see that this is, or you may be wondering, well, why do you have two separate groups, Lynette? Why don't you just do one? The reason for this is because this sensor is most likely going to be set up for daylight harvesting and probably occupancy sensing because you've got the windows right there. With this sensor, it's too far away from the windows to do any kind of daylight harvesting. So in this case, this one's most likely just set up for daylight harvesting and, just set up for occupancy sensing and no daylight harvesting. You'll notice that in these cases, again, hardwired means that you have that 0 to 10 volt dimming wire that's running from luminaire to luminaire to luminaire. So yes, you do have to run that 0 to 10 volt low voltage control wires in a hardwired type application. So moving on, this is very similar design, but in this case, a zone controller is being used. Maybe the luminaires require more amps, and so that's why you need this other type of zone controller. But again, you have the low voltage control wires running out to each of those luminaires. You've got the power pack getting power, and then you have that power pack running the sensor. Works with any 0 to 10 volt dimming luminaire. Ideal for mounting heights under 15 feet. Ideal for areas where you have greater amps and you need that 20 amp system. And I'm guessing this is probably set up for daylight harvesting because you can see the windows here, and it's probably also set up for most likely occupancy sensing because we do not show a controller in this space. If there was a wireless controller, it would then mean that it would be set up for vacancy sensing. So this is very similar to the previous example, but the only difference is that the sensor is actually getting power from the luminaire. The important thing here is that the luminaire needs to have a 12 volt aux. Not every luminaire has 12 volt aux, but if it does, you can simply power up this particular sensor with that instead of using that additional power pack. Now you're also going to notice that there's no low voltage control wires running from this luminaire to this luminaire. The reason for that is because this sensor actually has a fixture controller embedded in it as well. So this is operating this luminaire while this fixture controller is operating the other three. And that is why you do not need low voltage control wires going from this luminaire out to this one, because this fixture controller and sensor is communicating to this luminaire and is also sending a signal to this zone controller to tell these three other luminaires what to do. So again, this is probably also set up for daylight harvesting due to the windows and probably occupancy sensing since there's no wireless controller that you would need for vacancy. Now here's an example of, say, a warehouse with 6 aisles. One zone has 4 groups, the other zone has 2 groups, one sensor with controller operating each aisle using low voltage control wires. You can see here sensor controller or sensor with fixture controller with your low voltage control wires running from one to the other. This is ideal for mounting heights where you're above 12 feet all the way up to probably about 40 feet. So really more high bay applications. And again, this particular sensor most likely is probably programmed using the app as an occupancy sensor because I don't see that there's any skylights here or any windows. So they probably don't really need to use daylight harvesting. And if they did, they could use it if they wanted to. Okay. And by the way, this particular sensor does get powered up or connected to any 1/2-inch knockout if you want, or otherwise it can also go into a J box as well. So now let's show you how a plug and play is different. So in this example, we have the plug and play controller with sensor. This is the Zaga Z10 one. No low voltage control wires are running from luminaire to luminaire. That is what's awesome about the plug and play. You don't have to worry about having extra wires like you do with a hardwired system. But we also realize that not every single system is plug and play and controls ready. So that is why we provide you the opportunity to add link using that hardwired solution if you choose to do so. And just keep in mind, since I've got this one up, this particular example, we were using the area light, but it does also could potentially work on these wall packs too. So it all is the same. It just depends on what product you want. So it's in this particular case, any luminaire that is approved for outdoor through our approved process and MTO as well. So kind of cool. All right, so let's talk a little bit about optional accessories since we just figured out how to install it in the various ways it can be installed. But these are your very few optional accessories, which is perfect. We don't need a bunch of stuff with this system. I think that's one of the other really great things about it. So you basically have the option of a wireless controller, either battery or line voltage. You also have a time clock. You've got a plug load controller and a signal booster. I'll be talking a little bit about all these optional accessories here in a minute. But the one thing that I just want to mention is that the signal booster, it is meant to be used when you don't necessarily have a strong signal or you have a lot of stuff in the space and the signal's having a hard time communicating. In this case, the signal can travel up to 1,000 feet line of sight if you are using the signal booster. And we will be doing more technical training specifically on that in a different training series. So tune in for that sometime. All right. So as I was saying at the start of this training, Link has a limited bill of material or I might have said it had a limited bill of material, and the fact that all it needs is the app, and then you choose which way you want to add, or how you want to add it to your system, right? So this one here is a very simple system, which I love the most about it. And what's great is that it gives you the ability to have any kind of installation that you need based on the project requirements. So a lot of versatilities. And again, keep in mind, a huge selling feature is that you do not need internet connection or Wi-Fi. The only time you need that is when you download the app. So another really awesome, amazing selling feature. All right, so let's get into these different components that I just mentioned too. So in this example, I'm going to be using luminaires with a fixture controller embedded into the driver. So with just the app and only the app alone, you are going to have the ability to have manual control. You can do zoning and grouping, and you can change those groups and those zones anyhow you want, anytime you want, using the app. Also, with just the app and just these luminaires that have the fixture controller embedded in the driver, you can also do some basic scheduling. You can use the app for dimming. You can set high and low end trim. And with these three luminaires, you can also change the CCT. Again, this is when the fixture controller is embedded in the driver. So what if you want to have manual control in the space? You can accomplish that with, say, a battery-operated wireless controller, which looks like this. Just remember from maybe some of the different training modules that you may have attended with me, this does not get wired into the circuit. In this case, it is battery powered, and then it sends a signal out to those fixture controllers that are embedded in those drivers. And then the wireless controller allows you to dim up the luminaires, dim them down. You can also have 3 scenes, and you can also have obviously it's a battery operated, so it can be anywhere in the space and it can travel around the space. You will need one of these per group, but keep in mind, in the event that you want to have more, maybe you want to do some sort of like 3-way switch, you would have multiple controllers using the same group. They would be programmed exactly the same though, but it would act somewhere like a 3-way switch. By the way, the battery in this battery operated wireless controller lasts between 3 to 5 years, depending upon the usage. And this is a fairly safe estimate. And just note, the switch will have a little blue light on during normal operation. If the battery is low, a little red light will appear indicating that it's time for a replacement. So it gives you kind of a heads up. So what if your project requires a line voltage controller instead? Because some local jurisdictions do require that. In that case, you can incorporate the line voltage controller. Now, the line voltage controller can be placed anywhere in the space. It just needs to have line voltage power. And also, it needs to have the neutral wire present. It's very important to have the neutral wire because some locations may not. And so they might be thinking that they can use this and then they can't, or they'll have to pull those extra wires. So just remember the neutral wire has to be present. If you wanted to, you could even add a battery powered controller that can float around the space. So you can use a combination of both of them if you choose to do so, which is kind of another nice, cool selling feature. The key takeaway here is that let's just say that you're in a remodel situation. You have a normal switch, on-off switch on the wall. You could remove that light switch and then wire this line control voltage controller into that same box. But the electrical contractor would have to make sure that constant power is going out to the luminaires and that constant power is coming into that line voltage controller. Because remember, the line voltage controller is not controlling the circuit. It is sending a wireless signal out to the fixture controller. It has nothing to do with the circuit at all. So what if your fixture controller doesn't have a sensor, right? Because remember those plug and play ones, you could choose if you wanted a fixture controller with sensor or not. In these here, the fixture controller is embedded in the luminaire. So in this case, you could easily incorporate a sensor, and you could commission these to be occupancy or vacancy sensing. And you can also set up different groups. So if I had one sensor on each one of them, I could, if I wanted to, have 3 or 6 separate groups if I wanted to. I could also have just one large group and have each sensor being able to pick up any kind of activity in that space. Or in some cases, maybe I just want one sensor, because that one sensor, maybe it's a small enough room, maybe it can pick up all the movement in that space. So there's no sense in having a fixture with a sensor, or it doesn't make any sense to have a sensor on every single one of those luminaires when you don't really need it, right? So you could certainly do this as well. Now, since these luminaires are controls ready, this is a simple push-in design, no wiring, no electrician, none of that. And when you do introduce a sensor, keep in mind you now introduce the ability to do daylight harvesting. You can also set your occupancy sensing, your vacancy sensing. Depending upon what sensor you're using, you can also set ambient threshold, your hold time, your time delay, even sensitivity. All of that is commissioned via the app. And if you want to even add in a controller to have vacancy sensing, you could do that too. So remember, if you're going to set the system up as a vacancy sensing type of application, you would need to incorporate one of the wireless controllers, because remember, with vacancy sensing, you physically have to come in and hit a button in order for those luminaires to turn on. And then once you leave, they will automatically dim down or shut off, however you have that programmed. Now, in order to understand what control solution works the best for you, it's really important for you guys to know all of these different control strategies, which you can find, I think, in like part 1 or part 2 of Controls Essentials. We so far have talked about all of these that can be part of the Link system, but the 2 we haven't actually talked about are scheduling and plug load control. So what I wanted to do is actually talk a little bit about plug load control and how you can incorporate that into a Link system as well. So if you want to do plug load control, you have to obviously purchase the plug load controller, and then using the app, you would assign one per group, and you would wire this up to 120 volt. Again, it's not part of the circuit, it just needs power. And by the way, the top receptacle on this plug load receptacle, the top one's always live power all the time. It's actually the bottom receptacle that will communicate to say that the laptop or the computer or whatever has to be shut off. And the way that that happens is that you have to make sure you are using a sensor. So what happens is that that sensor sends a signal to the plug load controller, the bottom part of the plug controller, and it says, hey, nobody's in the space. So whatever's plugged into this plug load control on the bottom, all of that stuff is going to shut off. TV, laptop, printer, whatever. And then as soon as that sensor sees somebody comes back in that space, it's going to send a signal to that plug load controller to say, oh, they're back, and everything's going to turn back on. That is how a plug load controller works. And in a lot of cases, in a lot of jurisdictions, it is now a requirement to have plug load control. You can have more than one plug load controller in the space if you choose to do so. In my example, I'm just showing one, but you could have more if you wanted to. Now, in order to understand the next one, scheduling, that's the last one we're going to be talking about. It's important to understand and realize that some manufacturers will use a gateway, which aids in keeping time in the event of a power outage. But with LEDVANCE LINK, it does not require a gateway, which makes our system extremely easy to commission because you don't need to have an internet connection. Plus, it makes it super secure because it's not always on an internet type of connectivity. And a lot of IT people love that. Now, since Link does not have a gateway, we need to use a time clock to ensure the time is readily available. So when using the time clock, it has a built-in battery. So whenever there's a power outage, the battery kicks in immediately. It keeps the network continuously scheduling until or on schedule until the power is restored. This is only necessary if you are doing scheduling and if you are obviously doing something with the circadian rhythm. This is the only time you really need to use the time clock. Also, I just want to mention is that you simply can purchase one time clock for the zone, and the zone is able to be managed with just this one time clock. It plugs into any USB-A port, just like your phone would charger would plug into. So you can plug it in anywhere in that space, and it will continuously keep that system on schedule and make sure that when the power comes back on, it's on at the right, comes back on and they know what time it is. As a side note, if you choose to not use the time clock and you do have a power failure, you could just grab your app and reconnect to the system. It's not quite as simple and easy as to just have a little, time clock in the space, but you can certainly do that if you choose to, in the event you do not want to use a time clock. You just have to make sure you reconnect so that the system knows what time it is so it can go back onto its normal schedule. So a couple last things to mention is I said this at the very beginning of the training, and that is each node or each component of the Link system has a communication range, and they vary from one product to another, okay? So this particular wireless controller is going to have a different communication range than, say, this push-in sensor. As a matter of fact, the wireless controller can't exceed 100 feet, and the little sensor here can't exceed 50 feet from another node. If I was using the fixture controller with sensor, the other one that you see here, you can see this one here, you can't exceed 100 feet. Pay attention to the spec sheet. This is really critical when you're designing the system because you don't want to have these things too far apart where they're not going to communicate and you're not going to have a good solid system. So let's walk through a little scenario on how the system communicates. Remember, it does communicate via a Bluetooth low energy mesh. So in this case, I have one wireless controller, I have one group, and I am assuming that these luminaires are 30 feet apart from one to the other. If these two luminaires go down and become inoperable, what happens to the rest of the system? If you said they will not turn on and work, that is exactly right, because you have exceeded the 50 feet that sensor is now to the next working node. So that is why it won't go any further. It can't exceed 50 feet, as the spec sheet says. In this case, though, let's just say one of these luminaires tends to get inoperable. If that's the case, the rest of the system is going to continue to work because it is a Bluetooth mesh, and they will continue to have the signal go around in any direction it needs to. As long as they're within range of another one, the entire system will continue to operate and work just fine. So in all of these examples that I used, by the way, when I went through all of the luminaires and all the different ways that you can do like program scheduling and adding in a time clock and all that kind of stuff, I always use the example of the luminaire that has the fixture controller embedded in it. What I wanted to do right now is just make sure that you guys are understanding that although the example I used in this particular training was a fixture controller embedded into the driver, and yes, that does mean you get to have the ability of CCT with the app. You can do all the same stuff besides the CCT selectable, whether you're using a plug and play or if you're using hardwired. You can add in all the same great stuff: the controllers, the time clock, the plug and play, or the plug load control, or even the signal booster. They all work the same way, and you can have a hodgepodge of everything. Maybe you have some embedded luminaires, maybe you have some hardwired ones, maybe you have some plug and play. They will all communicate in the system. It's no worries and big deal whatsoever. And what's great about that too, as I've already said multiple times, is that this makes for super easy installation for any project and really customizable to what your customer needs are. So one of the other things I just wanted to talk to you about too is that we talked about fixture controller versus fixture controller with sensor. I wanted to go through this just real quick too as some additional little highlights. So number one, let's assume that you're using a warehouse and it has 4 different aisles, and each one has its own group. You may choose to do a sensor on each luminaire, as you can see here. I should say fixture controller with sensor. And in that case, no matter where you're at within that aisle, one sensor is going to pick you up, right? However, some people may choose to do one fixture controller at the beginning of the aisle and maybe another one at the end, and then just have a fixture controller in the center. That could potentially work. Or you can maybe have 2 fixture controllers with sensor at the beginning of the aisle and only a fixture controller at the very end. Or you can also choose to do just one fixture controller with sensor at the beginning of the aisle and then have the rest be just a fixture controller. Just remember, if you're at the very, very end of that specific aisle, that sensor is not going to pick you up. So it could potentially shut the group off, even though you're at the very bottom end of that aisle, because there's no sensor above your head going, oh, somebody's still here. So just kind of keep that in mind. But that's basically the different ways that you would maybe incorporate a fixture controller versus fixture controller with sensor. And then as we move into commissioning, I'm not going to go into detailed commissioning in this video. This is basically what some screenshots look like. We do have a very quick commissioning video available. I think it's like 2 minutes long. It gives you the very basic steps that will allow you to get up and running. It is meant to just provide you with the basic steps, but we will have a more detailed commissioning video, which you can find on our website, or we just don't have it posted as of this recording, but we will. And so just keep an eye out for that as well. And remember, LEDVANCE LINK has some amazing applications. It can fit nicely into a lot of these different types of applications. But if you are wanting to do BMS integration, enterprise control, or have major advanced features like HVAC and so forth, maybe this system isn't quite exactly right for you. But if you're looking for a solid system that can provide you with the essential lighting control strategies in a very easy, simple way, we can 100% do that. As we talked about, it can easily achieve all of these essential lighting control strategies in a very simple, easy system. And then the last thing too is that just if you're interested, if you get onto the DLC website, you can go to the Find Products, select your manufacturers from this list, and you can easily compare a side-by-side comparison of all network lighting control solutions and exactly see where they are set up. I will say that if you do this, we are working on updating ours as of October 2024. I would say by the end of the year, all of our information should be accurate. In case you're seeing some stuff going, I don't know if that's quite right, just reach out to us and we will definitely let you know if it just hasn't been updated yet. But it's a pretty cool system that allows you to really do a side-by-side comparison, which is absolutely amazing. So I want to thank you for your time today. To obtain your certificate of completion, please scan the QR code. It's going to ask you some questions about the training today. It's going to give you some quiz questions as well, and then you'll also get your certificate of completion as well. Thank you very much for your time again.